Greetings, everyone. Tonight is one of the most exciting events of my time as Chancellor, namely the opportunity to celebrate the enormous success of the Hewlett Challenge. My remarks right now will be, by necessity, but also for your good fortune, very brief, but I'll speak in somewhat greater length at dinner. I first want to welcome all of you and recognize the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation for making an unprecedented investment in Berkeley's excellence. I, of course, also want to thank the many donors who have stepped up for the Hewlett Challenge. To kick off the celebration, we invited 4 faculty members who are benefiting from the Hewlett Challenge to talk about what makes them passionate about their scholarly work. So let me first introduce tonight's moderator, who we also got a brief glimpse of, Ken Goldberg, who's the Craiglist Distinguished Professor of New Media, a professor of Industrial Engineering and Operations Research, and co-founder of the Berkeley Center for New Media. And I'm confident that all of you will be inspired by these talks by some of our most distinguished faculty. Ken.
Thank you, Bob. Your enthusiastic and visionary leadership is appreciated by all of us here at Cal. And I think you and Mary Catherine deserve a big round of applause for this. What a week it's been. I've had the pleasure to work with the team here at Cal preparing for tonight's event in the middle of last-minute discussions about the upcoming election next week, the tragic events related to Hurricane Sandy on the East Coast, and savoring the come-from-behind victory of the Giants in the World Series. Now, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and my parents brought me to this campus when I was 8 years old, and it was love at first sight. My cousins went here, my sister went to Cal, and I was lucky to marry Cal alum Tiffany Schlein. So it is a huge honor for me to convey on behalf of all the UC Berkeley faculty a heartfelt thanks to the Hewlett family, the Hewlett Foundation, and all of the challenge donors for making this magnificent gift. Just as actors hope that one day they might receive an Academy Award, and baseball players from the Little League up through the pros dream that one day they'll win the World Series, the superlative honor for a faculty member is to be named to an endowed chair. This tradition dates back over 2,000 years to the Roman Empire when Marcus Aurelius endowed 5 chairs in philosophy. And tonight we celebrate not 1, not 5, but 100 new chairs. For academics like me, this event is a much bigger deal than the World Series. And like professional baseball and Hollywood, higher education is extremely competitive. Other institutions routinely reach out and try to lure away our top faculty. And the endowed chairs provide a key line of defense. They allow Berkeley to recognize and retain our most coveted colleagues. The Hewlett Challenge and the matching gifts recognize work in established fields such as physics, chemistry, and English, but they also are able to spotlight emerging new fields of research, such as stem cells and urban teaching, or my own field, new media. Shortly after the Hewlett Challenge was announced, Berkeley was contacted by Craig Newmark and Jim Buckmaster. They're the founders of Craigslist, one of the top 10 internet companies in the world that's dedicated to connecting people and to community service. Craig and Jim wanted to recognize Berkeley's long tradition of pioneering research in the internet that dates back long before Facebook, Twitter, or even Google. So they were brought together with the Berkeley Center for New Media, a relatively new unit on campus that brings together students and faculty from over 30 disciplines, from engineering and architecture to law and art and philosophy. And together, they worked together with the development staff, and they came up with the terms and defined the conditions to establish the world's first chair in new media. I hosted a visit by renowned science fiction author William Gibson. Now, he's written many novels and is widely regarded as the father of the cyberpunk movement. He's coined a number of terms, such as cyberspace. And when I handed him my card, he took it, he looked it over, and his bushy eyebrows were raised a bit, and he looked over and he said to me, "The Craigslist Distinguished Chair in New Media? That is an incredibly cool title." And I have to agree. These chairs open doors, and they make a huge difference to the recipients. My own research is at the intersection of what C.P. Snow called the two cultures, of technology and the humanities. The chair funding I receive allows me to work with a brilliant graduate student from the Department of Film and Rhetoric. Chairholders use these funds to explore new and speculative areas of research. For example, as we all watched the terrible image of Hurricane Sandy last week, which revealed the enormous power of nature, I had been thinking about how we can use new media to visualize the ongoing and potentially threatening seismic fluctuations deep within the surface of the Earth. I was recently commissioned by the Nevada Museum of Art to develop an installation, so I met with Richard Allen, the director of UC Berkeley's seismology laboratory. I asked him if we could use the stream of seismic data from his seismometers to drive a large-scale color display based on the abstract color field paintings of Kenneth Noland. Now, I realize that's a bit preposterous, and many academics would express distrust or even hostility to such an inquiry from someone outside their field. But Richard listened carefully to what I had to say. He studied the diagrams and the images I had brought with me, and then he leaned back, and he smiled, and he said, "This is really interesting. I don't know if it's going to work, but I want to share this with my colleagues. Would you come to present next month at our department colloquium?" And that response exemplifies what I love about Cal. Cal has created a culture that is truly open to novel and unorthodox ideas, combined with the scholarship to subject these ideas to the utmost standards of rigor. Tonight, we've asked 4 of our chairholders to present snapshots of their research. And partly inspired by the TED lecture series, we've asked them to compress their remarks into just 10 minutes each. Now, that's a lot to ask for an academic. We're used to writing more detailed, nuanced research papers and giving usually at least 45-minute presentations on our work. So we'd like you to think of these as abstracts to a much more comprehensive research papers. Our goal is really to whet your appetites for a much more thorough discussions over dinner. The 4 professors span a truly wonderful range of subjects, from the inner workings of the human personality to the outer limits of the universe. First, we'll hear from Eli Yablonovitch. He's a professor of engineering, and his research has made improvements in commercial solar panels and semiconductor lasers. Then from John A. Powell, an internationally recognized civil liberties scholar and director of Berkeley's new Haas Institute for a Fair and Inclusive Society. Then we'll hear from Serena Chen, who has won one of our distinguished teaching awards and is director of the psychology department's Self-Identity and Relationships Laboratory. And batting cleanup tonight will be Saul Perlmutter, an astrophysicist and winner of another, almost as prestigious honor this year, the Nobel Prize in Physics. So please join me in welcoming Eli Yablonovitch.
So it's my pleasure to talk a little bit about energy. And here on this slide, I'm showing Some of what we have grown accustomed to is the idea of large-scale solar panels that are actually producing quite a bit of energy. And let me show you a slide from Germany. And it shows the amount of solar generation that occurred back in May of this year. And what you have is a remarkable sight is that half the energy, half the electrical energy in the entire nation of Germany was actually being produced by these types of solar panels. And this is an indication of the tremendous commitment and subsidies in Germany, but we need to obviously make further improvements in order to go further. So let me describe to you some work that was done with a graduate student here at Berkeley, and it's Owen Miller, who graduated in May of this year. And we have sort of changed the rules of solar cells and have broken the record of solar cell efficiency. And so I'll describe the old picture of solar cells is light came in and you produced an electron in a hole and you collected them and you got electricity. Okay, and let me show you the new picture. In the new picture, the light comes in and doesn't always go directly to electricity. First, it goes to infrared radiation. And the infrared radiation bounces around inside the solar cell. Some of it escapes. And you end up with the remarkable situation that you might have one sun coming in, but you trap internally 40 or 50 suns of infrared radiation. And this becomes then a requirement for achieving the new efficiency records. So the efficiency in the past couple of years has gone from 25% to very close to 29, and soon it'll be 30% efficiency. But I have to tell you that it didn't come automatically. Of course, Owen did his research and he figured out the theory, but until we started seeing some experimental results come in, we didn't really believe the theory that strongly. And the first indication was the voltage. The voltage was, we were getting a voltage that was way higher than expected. And they were higher than anyone had ever seen before. And we went back and looked at the theory, and of course it was all there. And what the theory says is that in order to achieve these very high voltages, you actually, not only do you take the sunlight in, but you have to give some light back. Some of the infrared light has to be given back. And this is extremely counterintuitive. And we got a lot of resistance to our ideas. It says, well, why should a solar cell ever give any of the light back? And yet it's a requirement to achieve the highest efficiencies. And so I think this is something that is just gradually seeping into the field and becoming accepted. But it helps a lot, of course, to have a world record to go along with it, which he does. Now, the question arises how to make these. Of course, now the efficiency looks like it's going to be very high. And, well, we'd like to make them out of gallium arsenide. These are the best solar cells, use them on satellites, but the cost is very, very high. So let me show you how the cost is going to be reduced. And this is by peeling the films off of a substrate and reusing them. And it just so happens I have one here in my pocket. And I'll just show you what it looks like. This is basically the new type of solar cell that has this fantastic efficiency, and it's completely flexible, just like in the picture. And what we envision is that this type of material will actually be covering large tracts of land and be kind of a new type of agriculture, a new way to use land to produce energy. And so that's part of the excitement there. So let me go on to another aspect of energy, and this is something maybe we're all accustomed to, is we click on Google and we get the information we want. And you may have wondered, where does that come from? And it actually comes from a Google data center, and there are other companies as well, of course. And the data centers, well, they're kind of big like this, and from a distance they look a little bit like a power plant. In fact, they're usually adjacent to a power plant because they use so much electricity. And so this is a problem that will continue to create difficulties as we expect more and more from the cloud, from the internet. And you can see that the amount of energy dedicated to data centers has gone up in 2000, 2005, and up to 2010. It's well over 2% of our electricity is going into data centers. And of course, there's the rest of electronics also. So the energy use, the electricity use in electronics is very important. And if you ask, well, where's the energy going? Well, it's going to all these wires. This is sort of a close-up of a chip. And looking inside, like X-ray vision, you see there's all these wires, and most of the chip is consisting of wires. And you're putting a voltage on, and as you put on more voltage, you use more energy. And so the problem is the voltage is too high. If you look at what has happened with the development of the electronics industry, the voltage was going down, 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 and now it has stopped going down very much. And your chips are requiring about 1 volt of electricity. Now, if you look, though, at the requirement, what would a chip really need? You should be able to go down to 1 millivolt. So it looks like we can reduce the voltage by 1,000, and energy goes as voltage squared. And so it looks like it should be possible to make electronic devices, electronic chips, cell phones, you name it, 1 million times more efficient. And so this has turned into a very big research project here at Berkeley. Let me show you the device that is going to replace the transistor. And it's a little hard to explain, but the current comes in here and it jumps across, and you have both, like a normal transistor would have just an N channel and a P channel. Here we have both, and it jumps across by quantum mechanical tunneling. And this looks like it's capable of having much lower energy. It's another picture of the same device. The current would come in, jump across like that. And the secret to making it work as a switch is you have energy levels, and when the energy levels are lined up, the current jumps across. And when they're misaligned, if the energy level is up here, the current would have no place to go. And so this is a new device that we are working on that we just recognized just in this year that looks like it is the best candidate we have for replacing the transistor with a much lower voltage device that would be much more efficient and save us many orders of magnitude in energy. So the National Science Foundation has recognized the importance of this project, and with the leadership of Berkeley, we're leading both MIT and Stanford, and we have a national effort. There are also some international efforts to achieve the same thing. And so I'll just show you the magnitude of the effort. We have a great many professors who are all dedicated to this project. And this type of work is really enabled by the chairs and allowing us at the beginning stages to look at speculative research. But I'd like to close out my discussion with this paradox that I gave you earlier, is how could it be that a solar cell works best when it actually gives back some of the light? This is very counterintuitive. And my student and I have had tremendous difficulty getting people to accept that. But the analogy I'd like to give is with respect to society. And that is that the society works best if people also give back a little bit of what they have. And it's a little bit like how the solar cells become optimized. And they also give back a little bit, and this gives the highest possible output voltage. So.
So good afternoon. It's a delight to be here in this festive occasion. And I also want to thank you for investing in Berkeley, investing in the country, and investing in me. I hold one of the chairs, the Robert D. Haas Chancellor's Chair in Equity and Inclusion. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about diversity. And as you can see, I'm talking about diversities. There's not one diversity, there are multiple diversities. And what they mean and the significance in society actually shift. So there's not a singular way of thinking about diversity. There's multiple ways of thinking about diversity. And I'm just going to introduce some of that this afternoon. The Haas Institute for a Fair and Inclusive Society is organized around 7 clusters. And those clusters include looking at issues of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, looking at race, looking at issues around religion, looking at disabilities. So looking at many different ways in which we understand diversity and understand how diversity actually is played out in each of those clusters. And the work of the Institute is to actually create a hub. There are 8 chairs and 8 additional full-time faculty members organized within each cluster, and then another 10 faculties. So almost 100 faculty at Berkeley sort of looking at this, but then working with others to create a network and working with others across the country. So building relationship, building communication based on the new stuff we're learning about how the mind works. Now, we talk about the different diversities. When we think about diversity, we're most likely to think of racial or ethnic diversity. And the United States is a racially and ethnically diverse country, and increasingly so, and you probably know the numbers. So out of 310 million Americans, 40 million are Latinos, 35 million are African American, 16 million Asian, 4 million Native American, and 3 million Arab Americans. And the numbers are going up. So we're increasingly diverse, both racially and ethnically. But we're not just diverse racially and ethnically. There are 54 million Americans with disabilities. And one of the centers of sort of understanding and adjusting to the diversity around disability is UC Berkeley and Berkeley as a location. And so we're proud of that, and that's one of the clusters that we'll be looking at. Now, diversity is both a fact, but it's also can be a challenge. And so part of it is, how do we actually take this challenge and turn it into an opportunity? How do we actually think about diversity as both a challenge and an opportunity to build a kind of society that we want to live in? One way, of course, is to understand that diversity is actually quite complex and in some sense counterintuitive. And so you may recognize the yin-yang symbol there. And the reason that symbol is there is that when we think of the other, it's always inside of us. There's no such thing as an other that's not part of us. And so part of diversity, and the famous political philosopher Rawls made the observation that diversity is both an issue, a construct between individuals, but also an issue within individuals. That we always are dealing with diversity. There's no such thing as a uniform or homogeneous society. And then, of course, there are limits to diversity. Diversity does some work, but it doesn't do all the work. And so part of the thing is to understand this condition of diversity, what work is doing, and what work is not doing. Now, what we're most concerned about is where diversity operates across social cleavages. So you can think of internal diversity doesn't operate across an internal cleavage. You may have diverse views yourselves, but there's no social cleavage that actually separates you from yourself. And so part of the thing that's important is how diversity gets organized in society and the role that social cleavages does around diversity. And we only have to think about race as an example of that. But it's not just race, again, disability, religion, where we actually create institution narratives and understanding around these different diversities. So part of then the studying diversities, if we're going to seize this opportunity, is to address some of the social cleavages. And Robert Putnam, who is one of the great thinkers around the issue of diversity, has basically said a couple of things. One, he argues that diversity is really the great challenge in the 21st century, not just in the United States, but in the world. We all know that by the middle of this century, there will be no racial majority in the United States. Most of us don't realize that by the end of this century, no major city in the world will be majority white, not one. And what Putnam argues is that as you look at diversity and how societies deal with diversity, especially as we think of these social cleavages, it actually can put a tremendous strain on society, but it also is a chance for a wonderful opportunity. So Putnam's vision of dealing with this social cleavage is to build bridges across the cleavages, is to build social capital across these cleavages. And we certainly support Putnam's vision, but we take his vision a step further. So diversity is important, but it's not enough. We have to think about diversity in the context of equity. We have to think about diversity in the context of inclusion. And we have to also think about diversity where it can work and actually eliminate those cleavages. So just thinking of diversity itself doesn't take us to equity, inclusion, and addressing those cleavages. So at Berkeley, this is the work that we're trying to do. We're trying to deepen our understanding of diversity. And again, ground us in the notion that when we understand the other, is deepen our understanding of ourselves. When we don't understand the other or move away from the other, we're also moving away from ourselves. And our approach is to build and understand structures, understand the mind science and implicit bias, and how that works in terms of diversity, and how it also works in terms of our understanding of ourselves, and then understand power, how we actually do things in society. So it's not just what we think, it's what we do that matters as well. So if you think about an escalator, we're trying to get to the 3rd floor. And some people are literally on an escalator. Some people are running up the stairs. The structure matters. And sometimes I actually have an additional slide where I have someone in a wheelchair at the bottom of an escalator or stairs. So the structures matter. It's not that someone builds stairs or an escalator saying, let's leave the man or woman behind in the wheelchair, but our structures actually locate us differently within the system. And so part of the way that we deal with diversity is to say, let's treat everybody the same. But it turns out that doesn't work because we're not all situated the same. We're situated quite differently. So the idea of having universal strategies sound good, but actually doesn't work. The flip side is, okay, let's just have strategies for people who are situated, who are other. That doesn't work either. And so what we advocate is something called targeted universalism. The goal is to get everyone to the 3rd floor. The guy in the wheelchair will need an elevator. It doesn't make him special. His condition is different than the people who can stand on an escalator. So this is actually important. It's important in the context of our country. It's important in the context of this election that we're about to have. It's important to sort of understand that when we talk about race, when we talk about disabilities, we're talking about social location, and we're talking about location in relationship to those complex structures. So we have to look at the structures and look at the work the structures are doing. It's not enough just to look at the person. It's not even enough just to say we're not going to be prejudiced against the person. We have to look and see what work the structures are doing to actually enhance opportunity or deny opportunity. And so diversity turns out to be much more complicated than what we may think of at first blush. And this is the work we're doing at the Haas Institute. And as your moderator suggested, this is an abstract. This is a tease. So some of you may not like being teased. If you don't like being teased, then there's a way of not being teased. I've just written a new book. And yes, this is a plug for my book. And the title of the book is called Racing to Justice. There's actually a book signing, I think, this Wednesday that you're all invited to. But one of the things that's unusual about the book is I talk about race as a practice, not just as an idea or not as a description of a person, but it's what we do that matters, that create race, that create racialized outcomes. And that race is one of the ways in which we can think of diversity, or what I call the othering process. And it not only creates practice in terms of structures, but it also creates identity for everyone, not just for the people who are raced, but also for the majority. Thank you.
Good evening. Like the other speakers, I also wanted to start off by just saying thank you. It's been a real honor to have received this chair, and also a real honor to be able to share some of my research here with you all this evening. So thank you very much. Let me start off by posing the question, what is personality? Now, I'm guessing for most of us, this seems like a pretty straightforward question. Most of us could readily come up with descriptors to characterize pretty much anyone's personality. For someone like Mother Teresa, we'd probably say, oh, her personality includes traits like kind and compassionate. Michelle Obama's personality is probably characterized by traits like, well, it depends on what you think of Michelle Obama, but maybe ambitious, supportive, health conscious. Many traits come to my mind when someone asks me to characterize my son and my daughter. So from this sort of perspective, it seems that personality is about people's enduring traits, the characteristics that characterize a person, the traits that characterize a person across time and situations. Now, this trait-based kind of view of personality has dominated the field of psychology for decades. And this makes a lot of sense. It's understandable. It fits intuition to think about personality in terms of traits. It fits the language that we use to think about and communicate about other people's personality. But there's a slight problem with this trait-based view of personality, and that is that it doesn't always fit the data. People's behavior, our behavior, me and you, our behavior, oftentimes does not exhibit the kind of consistency across time and situations that a strict trait-based view of personality would suggest. Instead, the people we are, who I am, my personality when I'm giving an interview is really not the same personality that I am when I'm playing on the beach with my daughter, nor when I'm advising my graduate students. Instead, personality tends to be characterized, or most of our personalities tend to be characterized by variability across contexts, by what personality psychologists call if-then patterns or if-then contingencies. If I'm giving a lecture, if I'm giving a talk, then you'll get this in terms of my personality. I'm assertive and extroverted. But if you find me in a faculty meeting, I'm actually quite different. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm very reserved and introverted instead. This is the kind of conundrum that personality psychologists had to deal with, that the data don't show the kind of consistency that the enduring trait-based view of personality would suggest. I was a graduate student at NYU in the late 1990s when a groundbreaking theory of personality was introduced by Walter Mischel some 100 blocks up north at Columbia. He's actually still there doing this kind of research. His theory, the key insight of his theory, first of all, it provided a solution to this conundrum that personality can be so variable and yet still connote something stable, enduring about a person. The key insight of Walter Mischel's theory is that inconsistency in behavior and stableness, enduringness that we associate with personality can be and does coexist. How is that possible? The idea here is that you can think about personality in terms of being inconsistent across situations. So I'm different in one situation than the next, just as all of you are. But there's still stability in my personality within situations over time. So I am extroverted in one situation, introverted in another, showing inconsistency. But you can count on me stably, enduringly. You can predict me to be extroverted every time I'm in the lecture hall and introverted every time I'm at a faculty meeting. So you have that stability at this level of these overall if-then contingencies. Let me tie this insight that Walter Mischel had about this sort of dual nature of personality to my own research, how it's informed and shaped how I think about my own research. Since my days at NYU, I've been fascinated by how significant others influence how we think about ourselves, how we evaluate ourselves. I've been fascinated by this idea that we developed essentially relational selves or relational personalities with specific individuals in our lives. So take Bob as an example here, made-up person represented by the black silhouette figures on this slide here. Bob, over time, has developed a particular relational personality with his wife, potentially a very different relational self or personality, or me, with his children, with his father, with his boss, with his best fishing buddy, Jack. Now, in my research, I'm not just interested in this idea, hey, we act differently with different significant others. This we all know. But I'm really interested in my research, the crux of my research, is I'm looking at the ways in which these relational selves influence not only our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in our interactions with our significant others themselves, but also how they influence our interactions with new people that we encounter in our everyday lives. That the influence of relational selves extends beyond the significant other context. Let me give you an example here. Take Amanda here in the green sweater. Pretend this is Steve, her brother. Okay? When Amanda is around Steve, okay, her relational self is very competitive. They grew up competing, I'm better than you, no, I'm better, I got better grades, whatever. She's very competitive. That's her relational self when she's with her brother Steve. That's important to know, because every time she's around Steve, we can predict something about her. She's going to act pretty competitive. But what my research has shown, okay, this is in the laboratory, experiments have shown, is that Amanda's relational self with Steve influences her behavior more often than she probably realizes in her interactions with other people. When subtle cues remind us of a significant other, what happens is that brings to the forefront the relational self we are with the significant other. Only now we're enacting that relational self with a new person, and the significant other isn't even there. what my research shows, I want to give you a little bit more concrete flavor of what that means to sort of treat other people as if they were our significant other. And again, this is happening oftentimes unconsciously. In the laboratory, just to give you an example, we might subliminally expose our research participants to the name of a significant other. So they're not even aware that they're being flashed with the name Bob or Steve or Jake or what have you. And their behavior, their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors shift in interacting with a new person in the laboratory in ways that reflect how they typically interact with their significant other. So for example, people tend to pursue the goals that they typically pursue with their significant other, but now with a new person. They evaluate themselves positively or negatively as they do with their significant other, but now with a new person. They judge their behavior against standards that a significant other holds, even though the significant other isn't there. They behaviorally approach or avoid the new person as if he or she were the significant other. So relational selves has this impact that extends far beyond the significant other context. Let me bring it back to personality. What is personality from the perspective of my research? In my research, then, I'm not interested in ifs or situations such as a lecture hall or a faculty meeting. I'm not interested in shifts in personality as a function of those kinds of situations. I care about significant other situations. Okay, I care about when Bob is with his wife, the fact that his personality shifts to be fun and opinionated. But when Bob, the context is his boss, Bob shifts to be serious and submissive. But again, it's not just that his personality shifts when he's with these different significant others in his life. It shifts whenever he is in an encounter with a new person who somehow, consciously or not, and again, we've shown it happens many, many more times unconsciously than we obviously realize, these shifts in his relational personality occur. And just as with the broader Michel theory of personality, I would argue these relational facets of our personality are really, really core components of our personality and give us both that dual nature, that inconsistency, capturing inconsistency in who we are and how we relate to other people, while at the same time embodying consistency, that stability that we associate with the term personality. Because every time you're with a particular significant other or someone who reminds you of that significant other, you're such and such a way, even though in a different context, in a different relational context, you're a different way. Again, you show stability within significant other contexts over time, even while showing inconsistency across contexts. Okay, so what is my answer to what personality is? Yeah, sure, personality is sometimes made up of broad traits. I have a colleague and very dear friend who is optimistic no matter where, when, and with whom he's interacting. It's maddening at times, because I'm not that way. But what I would argue is that a more nuanced, a more accurate view of personality captures this inconsistency, this instability, this meaningful instability in our personality, while again, still allowing us to predict people, to still capture, embody the stableness, enduringness we come to associate with the term personality. Okay, let me end by just saying that I feel so fortunate and proud, really, to be a part of this institution. The psychology department here at Cal has been open to research and perspectives like mine, ones that challenge more traditional trait-based views of personality. And to me, this very fact epitomizes something about Cal's personality, so to speak. And we've heard this theme already in two of the speakers' remarks, and that's Cal's longstanding disposition to be open to, but really more than that, to celebrate diversity, and not just the people that we see here around on campus, not just in terms of race and socioeconomic status, but in my case, in terms of perspectives on the nature of human behavior. That our university, our great university here, at once supports, encourages, sometimes challenges and debates, but ultimately embraces a diversity of perspectives and makes me be able to do the research that I do here at Cal. Thank you.
Well, good evening. I was asked to say some personal impressions on the accelerating universe, which seemed a bit challenging. But I found myself remembering, this is myself as a graduate student, talking in a conversation with a good close friend of mine, who was my only friend who was in physics, both undergraduate and graduate with me in school. And I remember having expressing my real concerns that I wasn't sure I'd be able to find a topic for a research project that would fit what I was really wanting to do. I really wanted to get something that was very deep, fundamental, felt sort of almost philosophical about how the world works, and do it as a just practical physics project. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought maybe we just all end up choosing some problem and just working with whatever it was. And then within just a couple of years, I was lucky enough that I came across the perfect problem for this. It was the question of what is the fate of the universe, and even better, it came along with another problem, which is the universe infinite or finite? I mean, what could be better? Even just the words have capital letters in them, when you say the questions. And so I loved the fact that I was able to actually start a project that was exactly what I always wanted to do, that I really cared about. Now, I think it might be worth just describing why is it even possible to make just a practical measurement that would tell you something like what is the fate of the universe. And so let me try to describe of what that meant. And it begins with the idea that we've known since the time of Hubble, back in 1930-ish, that the universe is expanding. And when I say that, you should immediately be puzzled, and your mind should already start to be boggled, because you start asking, well, what could a universe be expanding into? And so I always sort of stop and say, well, OK, what we mean by expanding universe isn't what it sounds like. You're supposed to imagine a sort of infinite universe. This is my attempt at drawing an infinite universe. These are supposed to be galaxies, and you're supposed to imagine that if I could draw better, I would have an infinite number of galaxies going on forever that way, and down to the floor, and into the board, and out towards you. And this is a cartoon universe, of course. The only thing that matters is that there's an average distance between the galaxies. And when I say that the universe is expanding, all I mean is that all the distances are just getting a little bit bigger. And that's all I mean by expanding universe. Nothing is expanding into anything else. If anything, we're sort of pumping space in between all the points in the universe. And that's the way we picture an expanding universe. But with that one simple picture of an expanding universe, you immediately start asking questions. And people did since the time of Hubble. Like, will that go on forever? Can't you imagine that maybe it might be slowing down because you would expect that each of these galaxies would gravitationally attract all the other galaxies, and that would slow the expansion? And could someday the universe come to a halt? Could there be an end? And so that turns this from a sort of abstract philosophical question into a practical question we can measure. The reason that actually became possible just around the time when I was worrying about what project to do is because we discovered that there was a kind of exploding star, a kind of supernova, which we understood in a new way. These supernovae are really, really bright. And this one exploding star can, just for this few weeks while it blows up and it brightens and fades away, can be brighter than the entire 100 billion stars in the same galaxy as that star is found. So they're tremendously bright. You can see them at vast distances. And what was wonderful about this one recognition that there was a certain kind of supernova that you could recognize is that that kind of supernova acted as a standard candle. It always reached about the same brightness and then faded away. So you could tell how far away it was by just looking at how faint it looked. And so it was very easy to know exactly how far away you were looking every time you saw one of these supernovae explode. But in astronomy, when you look far away, you're actually looking back in time. And that's just based on that simple idea that light takes time to travel to you. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but when you think about it from the astronomical perspective, and when you realize how far these exploding stars could be seen, you're actually talking about something rather interesting. So let me just walk through a little bit of that. The sun is not that far away, but the light still is taking 8 minutes to travel to us. If the sun were to go out, we wouldn't know about it for 8 minutes. Then we'd notice. Skipping past the nearest star, the nearest galaxy of stars is much further away. Now we're looking at light. All the light that we're seeing here left those stars 150,000 years ago. So here on Earth, at the time when the light left those stars, it's the first evidence of human culture on Earth. That's my attempt at drawing human culture. nearest galaxy cluster, in other words, that's a congregation of galaxies of stars, is much further away. Now we're looking at this light that left these stars some 65 million years ago. So here on Earth, at that time, the dinosaurs were going extinct. And even that distance, yeah, my extinct dinosaur, and even that distance is nothing compared to the most distant exploding star that we can see. So the supernova that we've seen that's the most distant is about, the light's been traveling to us for 10 billion years. So there's a historical event that only lasted for a few weeks, and that we now know about 10 billion years later as light reaches us. I mean, it's just amazing. But that means now that we can ask questions about, well, what's the universe been doing for the past 10 billion years? And in particular, has it been slowing down? And has it been slowing down enough so that someday it might come to a halt? And is there enough stuff to gravitationally slow it? So that's something that the one other thing you need to know is you need to know if you found these spots at different points in history, how much has the universe expanded since that time in history? It turns out there's a really convenient trick. The supernova's color tells us the answer to that one. And to give you a sense of this, we call this the redshift of the supernova. But let me just show you how it really works. The supernova explodes in some distant galaxy over here, and it looks, a supernova, if you could stand up close and not die, would look blue. And so that's a short wavelength of light. And then the light starts to travel to us in an expanding universe. And in an expanding universe, anything that's not nailed down expands just with the universe. And that includes the very wavelengths of light that I'm talking about. So that blue light starts to stretch with the universe as it travels to us. And by the time we see it, it looks reddish. And how red it looks tells you exactly how much the universe has stretched since the time. And you know that time because you know how bright the supernova is and how far back you must be looking. So it's the most direct, simple experiment that I know of to get at something incredibly deep, which is, what's the fate of the universe? So we got to work on this. We had to use the biggest telescopes in the world. It's a whole other story. I'll tell you all about that someday if you're curious. You had to look through thousands and thousands of galaxies to find these exploding stars. They're pretty rare. And the galaxies are these little faint blue specks in this picture, not these bright garish things. It's these little faint blue things are the galaxies you have to search through to find a new speck of light. That's the supernova. It's a really tough job to find them. So a lot of the earlier work was computer image analysis that allowed us to have the computer home in on this little patch here and show us the new light that's there that wasn't there 3 weeks earlier. If you subtract this image from this image, you see just light of the supernova. And if you were able to see this from space, as we later were able to, you actually can pick out the little spot that's the supernova. In the background smudge, that's the galaxy. And here on Earth, they all get blurred together. So we developed those techniques, and I'll tell you about that later, but eventually we had 42 supernovae in hand, and it seemed like an auspicious number to study the fate of the universe, for those of you who read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And we were ready to plot them on this plot of the fate of the universe. What is the average distance between galaxies as a function of time? And the options were great. One option was that the universe would slow and slow, but expand forever. And just to give you a feel what that would look like, you imagine that you're lying on your back, and I guess you have telescopes for eyes, and you look out, and you see everything expanding away from each other and away from you, and it's going on forever, but slower and slower. So that was option one. Option two was a little bit more dramatic. There, the universe slows to a halt, and then turns over and collapses, and comes to an end. That was going to be more exciting. That one begins, it looks the same at the beginning. So it expands and slows to a halt, and then it starts turning around and coming back in at you. And you start to feel a little nervous at this stage. And this universe really comes to an end. And so that was option two. So we were going to get to a plot and see where the supernova fell is on this line, and we get to find out the fate of the universe by just measuring the brightness and colors of these supernovae. It was great. And it turned out that we looked to see which answer was the answer, and the answer was that. So the universe is apparently not slowing down at all. It's just going whoosh. And pretty soon it'll just accelerate, take off. And I've been telling the funding agencies that you have to fund us now because we only have a few more billion years. You won't be able to see these things for very long. So this is what we saw, and it's the best possible result for a scientist, right? Because Either result would have been great. And we got neither of those. We got something even better, a mystery, a surprise. We've no idea why the universe is speeding up. What is going on? And just to show this to you in what the real data looked like, so the supernova we started to plot, their brightness tells you how far back in time you're looking. Their redshift, how blue to red, tells you how much the average distance between the galaxies is shifting. The data points all missed all the predicted lines here, and we're apparently on this universe that used to be slowing in the past, but it's now accelerating. And this was something that was actually seen simultaneously at Berkeley twice. There was two competing groups by the end of this project that were racing to get this result, and within months of each other, there was two different exclamation marks going on. Our group was working mostly up the hill at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory with the grad students from Berkeley, and there was another group that was working down the hill, and the two groups were both seeing this result simultaneously. And I don't think that it's just a coincidence that we ended up with this Berkeley view of the cosmos. And I'll explain what I mean. First, I should say that we still do not know what's going on. We're calling it dark energy. If it really is an energy that pervades all of space, it makes up almost 3/4 of the stuff of the universe, and we've never seen it before. We don't know what it is. So it's a great project, and everybody's diving into this and ever since then and trying to figure out what's going on. It could be even worse. It could be that it's not a new energy, that we actually have to change Einstein's theory of general relativity. That would be even more dramatic if possible. And so we're on to a great project. All right, so is it just a coincidence that this happened at Berkeley twice, and the Nobel Prize is what this was what the Nobel Prize was for? And I think the answer is no. I think there are a few things about Berkeley, aside from the parking spaces, that I think have made it a very fertile place for this kind of work. And first, I'll describe that when I came to Berkeley, I was coming much attracted to the tradition of and the amazing breadth of experimental capability at Berkeley. That there were people in almost any area you want to work in. We had the experts here, and if the experts weren't down the hill, they were up the hill at the National Laboratory, which was so tightly integrated with the university. And so it was like the best place to come and do a experiment research project. But there was something beyond that, which I discovered when I came to Berkeley, which is that it's not just that all these things exist, it's that there's this amazing culture at Berkeley and how people work together, at least in the sciences as I saw it, which is this amazingly non-hierarchical culture where anybody's idea is welcomed, and that the young people in these groups, as a young even graduate student postdoc, I already had the elder, much more capable people listening to me in this picture, but you can see it replicated all over the university. And I think it's really something that is a sort of different spirit that you see here. And in some ways, it actually feels like it reflects very well something that California brought to the table. And may also tie in a little bit today to the Hewlett story, because I think there is this tradition that people still talk about of the HP way in which research was done in the Silicon Valley days, early days as well, which had this very non-hierarchical hunt for what good ideas are out there and who can work together on what. And then it's also, I think, something which is very important about what the chairs are providing that we're celebrating today, that they're providing this extra room for that kind of time and space for people to work together in this way. And so it feels like it's very appropriate to tell the story today to this group. And I wanted to finish with one extra element, which I think something like the extra time and space that's allowed, that these chairs allow, is important for. And that's that this work that I was describing struck us as really hard to do when we started the project. We thought it was going to be a 3-year experiment, a 3-year project. And we set off to work on it. 3 years in, we had not found a single one of these distant supernovae. 6 years in, we'd found a couple supernovae, and we figured out how to do the project. 9 years in, we had collected the data. By 10 years, we had actually gotten the result. And on almost any ordinary way of dealing with science and funding and things like that, you say, okay, you had your 3 years, you gave your best shot at it, it didn't work, you're done. But there's something about the extra breathing room to try a difficult problem, which I think is so important to remember, because many, many problems in this world are not problems that can be solved the first time around. And they take that ability and the support that, institutions like this can provide to allow that extra try until you get to it. If it's an important problem, you should be willing to spend 10 years solving it. None of us were disappointed. That's how we spent our 10 years. And I think there are many problems in the world, even outside of science, where I think none of us will feel disappointed if we make progress on them in more than 10 years. So let me finish with that thought, and thank you again for this organization here.
Now you can see why we asked Saul to go last, because it's a very tough act to follow, the nature of the universe. And I want to also say that I want to thank them, because they put in a lot of effort. There was lots of emails that went back and forth, and we really asked them to do something extraordinary, and they delivered phenomenally tonight. So we're going to invite you next to continue these discussions over drinks and dinner. But before we close, I want to thank Mary Keegan, Catherine Brennan, Amy Cranch, and all of the wonderful AV and event staff who have worked so hard to put this evening together. Let's remember that these chairs are endowed in perpetuity. And luckily, as Saul and his colleagues discovered, the universe is going to be around for a while. I can imagine a celebration in the year 4012 on this campus, when future generations will look back over 2,000 years of insights that were enabled by the Hewlett Challenge. For me, Berkeley is the best place in the universe. It's the darling of higher education, and it holds a special place in many hearts. For its commitment to public service, its rigor in scholarship, its unparalleled culture of openness and collegiality, and its hard-earned and long history of standing up for the underdog. The Hewlett Foundation and all of the challenge donors have made a magnificent, sweeping, and world-class contribution to sustaining this tradition. Thank you again, and go Bears.